The introduction from Crazy Da Must Sing, inclined to his weaker side. Confessional Poems of Liberation and Love by the Western adept Daji John, published in 1982. Master Daji John and the Heroic Way That He Teaches by Daji Bodha. There is a person supreme whose being is love, whose form is pure radiance, and who can never die. In this doubtful age, as in all times and in all worlds, the person supreme is revealed to man by the sacrifice of those most blessed among all living beings, the great adepts, whose lives and words are given for the liberation of others. The poems in this book are the confessions of a spiritual warrior. They tell of Master Daji John's lifelong struggle to liberate others from the siege of Narcissus. The enlightenment of others is Master Da's destiny, and the dramatic play of his teaching work is the subject of these poems. About the sacred function of the poet, Master Da has said, in the ancient days, poets were regarded as sacred beings, involved in a magical process, who dredged up or released from the center of the world a consideration of existence not commonly touched by people involved in the conventional mind of speech and logical propositions. There is a rhythm, a meter, in poetry that corresponds to a certain ecstasy of mind that is different from the mind that makes common speech or logical conventional communications. The occupation of making poetry has traditionally been regarded as a kind of sacred activity engaged by sacred fools who are out of touch with the usual structure of things, at least when in the mood of poetry. Today, Master Daji John lives very much like the ancient spiritual poets, as a paradoxical person whose work is unconventional, but highly valued by the people who come into contact with him. Although Master Da has never led a public life or appeared on the spiritual circuit, thousands of people have sought his help and received his blessing. He invites everyone to consider his radical spiritual teaching, and for 10 years he welcomed anyone with a serious interest to visit his sanctuary and approach him and his community of devotees. People from all walks of life have come to him. He has accepted the company of ragged misfits who have come empty-handed but in need of the Spirit, while at the same time he has rejected the company of socially influential and spiritually ambitious people who have sought association with him, but not the truth. Many people have met Master Da by chance and remained unaware of his identity and function, while yet overcome with emotion and love for the radiant stranger. Even his disguise of ordinariness cannot hide the spiritual radiance that emanates from him. Still, others have studied his teaching, listened to him face to face, even confessed their love and commitment, and yet in time have gone their way, rejecting the possibility of his spiritual offering or denying their capacity to live his teaching. Yet even those who have found disagreement with his teaching and sometimes wild manner acknowledge that a mysterious truth is operative in and through this paradoxical man. The truth is that Master Daji John is a very strange, paradoxical, loving and wild being. As he has written again and again, told anyone who ever asked, and told even those who have not asked, but to whom he managed to communicate his radical vision and realization of our existence. He says, you must realize the condition of light itself. You must realize the truth. You must become God. You must awaken to the form, the fold, the destiny in which you inhere. Then you will go beyond all the mechanical destinies after death, and beyond reincarnation, beyond other worlds, star worlds, sun worlds, beyond the galaxies, beyond all the infinite multiplications of possibilities of stupid existence, with death following upon them, and you will simply become self-radiant, bright as God, and be wonderfully joyous, love bliss itself, transfigured even in this world, which is less than dog shit, made of dog shit, filled with food bodies, puffing and shouting and burping and gulping, as if infinity itself was sucked down with their inebriated screams. Even in such a world as this, it is possible to inhere in God, to be full of God, to be fullness itself, to transcend these motions, these changes, these befores and afters, and be happy simply, be full simply, be conscious only, be established in the wonder of divinity. And when you become most fully and maturely and absolutely established in that, then the self-radiant being outshines not only this possibility, but all of the worlds and all of these rotting rocks that surround us here, all of these futures and all of these pasts, because future and past exist simultaneously. We step upon life by moments, piece by piece, and never seem to recognize the whole of it, but all of it is absolutely transcended and gone beyond when we become happy. August the 27th, 1982. From birth, Masada has been possessed of this divine vision. His claim of God realization is indeed radical, not only in the light of the worldly conventions of our ordinary day-to-day existence, but also in the light of the great spiritual traditions. The realization and teaching of such a divine vision is not acceptable. First of all, the transformation of man into God violates too many ancient taboos, both secular and sacred. What is more, the way of life founded on realization is extraordinarily demanding and requires a sacrifice of the individual that very few are willing to endure. Even so, the crazy wisdom adepts like Masada do appear, and if the right circumstance can be created, their spiritual influence may greatly benefit mankind. The spiritual traditions allow and often glorify the unorthodox teachings of mad lamas, avadhuts, mahasiddhas, crazy wise men, eccentric hermits, revolving Sufis, and god-mad fools. Authentic realizers are rare, and although their lives have tended to be the most demonstrative and their teachings the most inspired and innovative, the crazy tradition still remains more or less unacceptable to the conventional mind. Eccentric spiritual geniuses have never been part of the archetypal conception of a legitimate spiritual personality in the West. However, as the noose of materialism tightens around our necks, and we observe the failures of mainstream religious fundamentalism to make any spiritual difference, we Westerners are beginning to find sympathy for the ancient secret traditions, even though many of the teachings that have gained notoriety in the West are no more than the popularized orthodox doctrines of Eastern religious fundamentalism. If we are to accept Masada as a realizer and acknowledge him as a transmitter of the divine influence and a spiritual baptizer, we must examine his life and teaching with more humor and expansiveness than perhaps we are used to demonstrating when confronted with the unfamiliar. There are many archetypes by which we evaluate and identify what we believe to be holy, an unusual revelatory experience that changes the course of one's life, the reincarnation of worldly ties, the renunciation of worldly ties, the ascetic vow, the cloth and countenance of the traditional holy man, monk or priest. These archetypes are common to religions all over the world, and the remarkable individuals who embody them are valued by the religious cultures in which they appear. The qualities and lifestyle of the saint, for example, although unconventional and becoming more and more rare, are certainly socially acceptable. Although the modern West has not yet produced a saint, and Western society at large remains basically benighted by its lack of tolerance and understanding of the true spiritual genius in general, the traditional cultures of the East have maintained an appreciation and tolerance of people of unusual spiritual merit. I am not speaking here of the priestly professions of the long-established religious cultures, but rather of those rare individuals whose lives are paradoxical, whose devotion ecstatic, whose style of living uncommon, and whose teaching unconventional. We in the West have at least some appreciation for the unconventionality and eccentricity of our literary and artistic geniuses. While in the East it has been culturally acceptable to be involved in spiritual extremes, Western society finds acceptable, even valuable, those involved in the aesthetic extremes. For example, the rather eccentric and uncommon lives of the English and American novelists and poets, of the European and American painters, do not meet our standards of conventional morality. Yet in our tolerance of creative genius, we reserve the moral judgments that we apply to more ordinary folk. In fact, such people are given intellectual and social prominence, and we feel that they are involved with a mysterious symbol for sacred activity, even though much of the art of the West today is far from sacred, like the spiritual ecstatics, who are their counterparts. The artists in the West are given cultural license, if not sacred office, and they live outside the common social formalities. As Westerners, we must begin to understand, respect, and value spiritual geniuses whose gifts far exceed the greatest aesthetic creations. The spiritual master must be understood, and the way of truth must not be limited by or confused with the traditions of conventional religious seeking. The spiritual master's creative calling is to transform, perfect, and glorify the consciousness of man, and thus we must value his work above all as the ultimate accomplishment, the transcendental art of the transformation of man into God. Because of the lack of understanding of the spiritual process in the West, Master Da's purpose, which is the literal enlightenment of others, has tended to be misinterpreted. Some people have experienced miraculous healings and uncommon psychic and spiritual revelations in Master Da's company, and thus they tend to regard him as a saint. I know many people whose burden Master Da has willingly shouldered at a different time in their lives, who credit him with miraculous changes and spiritual aid. Likewise, because of their experience of the extraordinary spiritual force or Shakti that surrounds and emanates from Master Da, others look upon him as a kind of superhuman spiritual machine. It is well known by his followers that he possesses the gift of empowerment and that he has established his spiritual presence in the temples, esoteric practices, and sanctuaries of the Johannine Dyer's Communion as agents of spiritual transmission, living works of spiritual art whose significance is their life-giving or healing power and initiatory force. Others, on the basis of personal experience of the power of Master Da's presence and study of his voluminous teaching, regard the wisdom and silent power they encounter in his spiritual company to be the signs of the world teacher or great sage. Yet these accomplishments appeal only to the spiritually inclined, for whom the curse of materialism has not yet shut the living spirit behind the door of reason. There are others who value his novels, philosophical and metaphysical writings, poetry, renderings of traditional texts, drawings and paintings as masterworks of extraordinary artistic genius. All these accomplishments notwithstanding, the ultimate significance of Master Da's life and teaching lies in his spiritual work to establish a living community of realized individuals. This must be viewed as his most important service. Liberation while alive is the highest hope of man. Apart from entering the earth plane in an already illumined state, as in the case of highly evolved spiritual beings, no way leads beyond the round of suffering we call humanity, except where there is the spiritual aid of a master teacher. Thus, Master Da's work is to establish an order of realized beings who will extend beyond the time of his physical appearance, the truly liberating spiritual process, as the alternative for anyone who would take up the God-realizing way of life. Master Da is a spiritual ecstatic. As such, he has been the subject of denigration by those who fail to practice or understand that the spiritual process ultimately manifests as an unconstrained life expression in the form of the adept. Neither the claims of sainthood and spiritual praise nor prattling abuse has caused Master Da to pause for even an instant in his work to liberate others. He would rather we understand our denial of the living God than pay him tribute and fail to realize the truth. One should not look for an armchair philosopher in Master Da John. You will not find the conventional wise man in the subconscious room giving tedious explanations for the standard metaphysical propositions. You will most often encounter him speaking ecstatically in the company of devotees, granting the transmission of radiant transcendental being through heart tears and spontaneous gestures of his entire body. In our naive assumptions about the incarnation of an enlightened being in the earth plane, we compare the process to something like a descent from heaven on an escalator. But in actuality, the divine manifests and takes hold through tremendous sacrifice. The poems in this book are a testimony to the sacrificial process the adept must endure. Their uniqueness is in their revelation of the great force of love that motivates the realized being's appearance. But the reader should not mistake the one to whom these poems are addressed. It is the reader, the egoic person, the narcissistic self, who must confront the poet's passionate criticism as well as his compassionate offer to love. Narcissus, the self-lover of Greek mythology, is a key symbol in Master Da's description of man as seeker, as one who suffers in dilemma. Poem 44. Who is not light itself, performs the murder of everything while we eat. So I am here to tell you everything must change. To now there is only the perfect refusal of love. Master Godfrey John has explained that a spontaneous but conscious choice marks the beginning of the difficult passage of the adept into the earth plane. There is a certain foreknowledge of both the dangers and the consequences involved in such a choice, since the adept must endure all the ordinary hardships and obstacles that fall to every born being. Because he chooses embodiment, only one purpose could possibly motivate the adept's decision to appear. That purpose is love, or the spiritual service of enlightening others. Embodiment for the adept is like a rescue mission. He has great faith that his realization cannot be lost in the effort, and that ultimately it will break through and prove beneficial in awakening others. However, once human birth is accepted, then the adept is obliged to endure the process of transforming the human entity to which he himself appears. As Master Da has often said, the process of transformation occurs in the context of limitations, and therefore it is a very great and dangerous struggle. The adept enters into a life and process of spiritual practice, either in the context of a traditional culture in which he learns directly from others, or, as in the case of Master Godfrey John, through an extraordinary process of submission and self-transcendence, outside the bond of all traditional influences. The purpose of such an appearance is to purify and realign the existing traditions. He says, if you want to learn about truth, When truth has become corrupted, then go to the adept. Go to one who has realized the truth. Go to one who has already fulfilled the process completely. If you live in a moment in time when there is no enlightened tradition, when all the cults are corrupt, you can be certain that somewhere on earth an adept is alive. Such a person appears under exactly those conditions, when truth is no longer visible in the cults, and when religions have become so corrupted by history and fetishism that they are about to become extinct from the enlightenment of the whole body. Master Dorothy John's early life and years of his teaching are characterized by a kind of spiritual naivety. His is not the usual traditional story. To be able to fully appreciate the contribution of his teaching and the gift of his spiritual transmission, we must release him of the stereotypes of the traditional holy man. Most simply stated, he has lived as a free man to whom the radiant and transcendental nature of existence has been obvious since birth. A free divine impulse has been the force and guide of his life. Master Da's spiritual naivety has made his life and teaching unique. He has spontaneously enacted the divine play of the God-realized adept among Westerners who lack the cultural and religious precedents for such an occasion. Master Da has written about the appropriateness of his spiritual naivety. He says, I have been naive and passionate in my work with those who come to me. I have been obliged toward others through the medium of friendship, enthusiasm, and brotherly concern. Thus, I have been moved to demonstrate the appropriate mode of relationship between human beings. No individual should live as the superior or the inferior, or even the equal of all others. Rather, each should live as the intimate servant of others through love. The politics of my relations with devotees is not like the politics of the common world, whereas in the past the politics of men was commonly the one of superiors and inferiors, as with parents and children. Now the common politics is the one of universal equality, as with children hide and play together, as when children hide and play together, secreted from their parents. No, the true politics of human relationships is the one of servants everywhere, everyone serving and everyone served. Therefore, I have lived as a serving brother among my devotees. Since childhood, I have been called Baba, meaning brother, and by this role in all its friendly excesses, I have made my friends to see themselves. Thus, when they had learned their lessons in my own form, they began to hear and see me through God-feeling, and when I felt them grow transparent through their love, I sought a place of solitude in which to wait in brightness. I am John, through whom God is gracious, and who is therefore free among the living. When it came time for Master Dorothy John to begin his teaching, he did not adorn himself with the traditional signs of asceticism or the political and social prestige of a mainstream religious movement. Rather, he appeared in the suit of freedom, glorified with spontaneous wisdom and discrimination, and inspired by no motive other than the liberation of those whom he would serve. His appearance is a refreshing relief from the archaic systems of belief and arbitrary rules of behavior that substitute today for the realization of truth or happiness. Master Da has been guided in his life and teaching by whatever has been necessary to awaken and serve the process of God realization in others. Thus, he does not live with devotees in the traditional monastic or saintly fashion. Likewise, and this would be a surprise to many, his teaching is not the result of a long study of traditional literature. When devotees appeared, the same spontaneity with which he had lived his early life was extended into the lives and circumstances of the people who came to him. After hearing Master Da recite the poems contained in this book, a devotee asked Master Da to tell how they had been written. The Master said, exactly as they appeared on the yellow pages. That is, they were written without any self-consciousness or thought or rewriting. With the exception of some revised capitalizations and an occasional comma, they appear in this book exactly as they were spontaneously created. Like the poems, Masuda's teaching was created exactly as it appeared, in the process of mutual love between the mad adept and his devotees. The following remarkable confession of Masuda's crazy wisdom or inherent faith in the power and supremacy of realization is taken from his discourse about the writing of these poems. He says, I have no sense of being superior to people or dissociated from them. I have just lived a very vulnerable life in which I struggled with circumstances. Nonetheless, this guide, this realization, this impulse, this force of God realization has been inherent in my existence since birth. That is just the way my teaching is. If you do not like it, if you think I am just an idiot or a freak or a street punk, or whatever your idea of me is, then I cannot do anything about it. My teaching is the product of a spontaneous realization and not of any formalized or formulated process of realization, or even a formulated traditional impulse to realization. I am not an informed character in the conventional sense, full of reading and all the rest of it. Last night, for example, I read to you some excerpts from a small book of tales about several sixth stage adepts, and in commenting on them, I labeled their tradition the talking school of Advaita Vedanta. Yet before that moment, I had never thought of the sixth stage schools in those terms. I did not pre-think the consideration. It was simply obvious to me what they are all about. Most of what I said to you I never would otherwise have thought about, yet it was clearly obvious to me in that moment that there is this talking tradition and that it attempts to formulate a logical equivalent to or substitute for realization. Everything I teach has happened in this spontaneous fashion, and something about it is obviously legitimate and true and remarkable and useful to people. This is how my teaching occurs. It is an intuitive process. Master John describes the spiritual development of human individual in terms of 7 stages. The 7th stage of the God-realizing stage, or the stage of perfect enlightenment. The 6th stage is primarily characterized by inversion of attention from gross and subtle objects and towards its root or source, ultimately leading to conditional self-realization or intuition of divine consciousness via the exclusive self-essence. For more on the 7 stages of life, see the enlightenment of the whole body, particularly chapter 7. He continues, those around me find it useful and remarkable, and that is good for them, and that is the way it is, and that is all there is to it. I think that it has also occurred this way in the case of the purest teachers in the past. The traditions are born of the great teachers and the spontaneous work. Those teachers who have had the greatest influence have lived in their own time and place, much as I have, in this naive, ridiculous, insane, wild and abused fashion. They too have struggled in the midst of a profoundly suppressive existence, but moved by a spiritual force that transcends their individuality, their personality, the time and place. So it is in my case. Such a life has all the artifacts and faces of ordinariness. This little booklet I read to you says of Atmananda, he or she was an adept of Advaita Vedanta, 1883 to 1959. This little booklet I read to you says of Atmananda that he did the sadhana or spiritual practice of normality. I too did the sadhana of normality or ordinary living, without benefit of a free tradition or great advice, in the setting of the Western world, which possesses no clear tradition of ultimate advice for anyone. Therefore, you cannot expect me to look like a highly polished, fashionable, conventional spiritual figure. Even so, people have complained about me, and while I have been teaching, people have become incensed and outraged, wanting to take offense and denigrate me. So that is the way it is, the way it has always been with me. I am just a naive, crazy kook from the country, in some ways very much like the characters in India, like Ramakrishna, living in the country or wandering in the cities, without any sophisticated learning in spiritual terms. There has just been this extraordinary movement throughout my life. Devotee, delighted by the Master's ecstatic revelation. Master Da, Ramakrishna often told his devotees that he had to curb his craziness in their company. He said, sometimes the Paramahamsa behaves like a madman. While I experienced that divine madness, I used to worship my own sexual organ as a Shiva phallus, but I can't do that now. Master Da, yes, he always fell into spontaneous moments of worshipping himself. In the temple, bowing to Kali and worshipping her, suddenly he would put garlands and the paste on himself and bow down to himself. He did not know what he was doing. I do the same. I tell you this remarkable teaching about devotion to me, yet I do not know why I am telling you. I just say it. Devotee, continuing his praise of the Master. My Lord, I find myself trying to explain to people that what you say always happens. It just happens. The teaching itself. Why should the teaching work? Master Da, laughing. For example, this awkward inquiry I gave you, avoiding relationship. It is not euphonious, like Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. It is an awkward little form of inquiry, but it derives from what is completely obvious to me. It is true, that is all, and so it is associated with mantric energy, but it does not sound very beautiful. And then there is Da. I do not know what I am telling you about this name Da. I do not know where it came from. It just occurred to me one day, this name Da. I saw it in a dream vision of myself with a potato head. I do not know what it is all about, but that is the way it is for me. I can only tell it to you the way it is for me. Apparently, from my sense of the traditions, this is also how it has occurred for siddhas of the past. Another strange example is my discovery of the writings of C.J. Young, back there on the beach. The important event in Master Da's early life of spiritual practice occurred in 1964. The work by C.G. Young, to which Master Da refers, is the interpretation of nature and the psyche. Please see the Neo-Listening Master Da's spiritual autobiography for his full account of the event and the revelations associated with it. It was not a discovery that one could have out-of-body experiences. I had been having such experiences, and although I did not know what to make of them, they were just the way it was for me. But I did not know that other people experienced this kind of thing until I read Young's report. Here, this legitimate psychologist wrote about it in this nice, straightforward way, with aligned margins. Here was somebody in the world saying that people have these experiences. I began to learn about the traditions, psychically to interpret the traditions, envisioning scenes from the traditions, seeing them as a whole, viewing expanses of centuries of spiritual teaching. They were right there in front of me, completely obvious so that often I did not have to read anything about them. My sense of the traditions is that they are basically the manifestation of the impulse of people like me. Out of such people like me, there come relatively rigid, analytically defined structural traditions, which also have their purpose, but which are basically responses to the work of people like me, who are never anything but insane. They are always insane. They were born insane. They live insane. They do everything spontaneously, and they experience remarkable psychic phenomena, like me. Nothing about such lives is created by the individual personality. My entire life and all my sadhana were spontaneous events, previsions and impulses, and I just did it. I have had no attachments to the world that would prevent me from living my next impulse. Devotee, all the people who say the name Da every night and every morning. Master Da. It seems right. There is traditional precedent for it. As I have indicated, that the adepts who told people to say the name of God, and to whom I could now point as a corroboration of what I am telling you, did not know what they were doing any more than I do. Their teaching, too, was just a totally spontaneous, crazy, wild impulse that they did not think about and about which they neither did any pre-thinking nor after-thinking. The adept saw somebody face to face, and that somebody asked a question, and the adept said, "Go and do blot to blot. Breathe air, sniff through your right nostril, recite my name and love God." And the guy smiled and was satisfied. You know these adepts. They do not know what they are doing. I do not know what I am doing. It is not a matter of knowing what you are doing. You cannot know what you are doing and do what I do. God does all this through insane beings like me. And insane beings like me sometimes look like nice, clean, celibate characters, and sometimes they look like obscene, ridiculous characters like myself. But they do the same work. It has its particular reason or non-reason in its time and place, and that is the way it is effective. If you do not like it, you go somewhere else, and if you do like it, you surrender to it. All I can do is just do what I am doing. I have the feeling that it is obviously about something. I have submitted myself to it, but I am so completely submitted to it that I do not think about it. I look for the signs of the usefulness of all of this in you, but even then I do not take them much into account. Whether you find it useful or not, I still can only do what I have to do. That is it. I have no ability to be anything other than what I am. I have no sinister intentions, no analyzed pre-thought strategies. I have no intentions at all. I am just doing this thing, and that is the way it has been since my birth. I have always been insane since the day I was born, mad with this formless condition that is only vaguely associated with my body-mind. I have been led by all kinds of psychic phenomena and intuition into my entire life as sadhana and teaching. That is just the way it is. If this is unacceptable to the common world, then I will just have to live outside the common world. If it is acceptable to devotees, then I can live with them to the degree that they will live with me and make right use of my availability. This process does not reinforce people's illusions about how it is supposed to work or their idea of the orderly universe. It is orderly in some profound and paradoxical sense, but not orderly as people expect orderly to be. If life were orderly as people would like it to be, there would be no death or suffering or disease or difficulty. The insanity of my teaching work is part of the order, this particular manifestation. When you die, you just sort of explode out of this realm and go on to do something else. It is a very strange, weird, total universe of God. What can I tell you? That is the way it is. God is crazy just like me. In fact, God is crazy just like you. You are God, and all of this is God. That is the way it has always been obvious to me. I have always been very attentive to people because I do not see any difference between God and them or myself and them. It is all the same thing, and so I just play it as it comes. This is God's business. I have never become serious about the human business. I have never been involved in anything but the God business. And the God business is very strange and paradoxical and wild. That is the way God is. That is what reality is. And neither you nor I have a thing to say about it. When we are busy saying things about it and trying to manipulate it and change it and make it something else, being called human, so-called, we interfere with our existence and make everybody suffer. As the poems in this book reveal, spiritual life is a very, very and creative struggle. The true way has been falsely glamorized by spurious teachings that, while perhaps providing an alternative to usual life, do not represent the discipline and commitment that the real spiritual process requires. Our conventional tendency is to value as fairy tales the lives and teachings of the great adepts, and to justify our lack of serious response with, well, such a person is enlightened, So what difference does it make to him what we do? Our stereotype of the enlightened being is that he is dissociated from ordinary life and relations, and thus apparently immune to suffering. But true compassion is not associative or abstract, and the world teachers of mankind are moved by a superhuman compassion to enter into the stream of humanity and serve the process of enlightenment in others. We should not forget to acknowledge and learn from the history of their struggle. The following examples from such God-realized beings express the love and commitment that characterize the transcendentally awakened or God-inspired servants of mankind. Gautama says, "When I used to enter into an assembly, I always became, before I seated myself, in colour like unto the colour of my audience, and in voice like unto their voice. Then with religious discourse I instructed, quickened, and gladdened them. But when I spoke, they knew me not, and would say, Who may this be who thus speaks, a man or a god? Then having instructed, quickened, and gladdened them with religious discourse, I would vanish away, but they knew me not, even when I vanished away." Gautama the Buddha, 563 to 483 BC. Ramakrishna says, "There was no limit," he once declared, "to the longing I felt at that time. During the daytime, I somehow managed to control it. The secular talk of the worldly minded was galling to me, and I would look wistfully to the day when my own beloved companions would come. I hope to find solace in conversing with them and relating to them my own realization. Every little incident would remind me of them, and thoughts of them wholly engrossed me. I was already arranging in my mind what I should say to one another and to give to one another, and so on. But when the day would come to a close, I would not be able to curb my feelings. The thought that another day had gone by and they had not come oppressed me. When during the evening service the temples rang with the sounds of bells and conch shells, I would climb to the roof of the kuti in the garden and, writhing in anguish of heart, cry at the top of my voice, Come to my children, oh, where are you? I cannot bear to live without you. A mother never longed so intensely for the sight of her child, nor a friend of his companions, nor a lover for his sweetheart, as I longed for them. Oh, it was indescribable. Shortly after this period of yearning, the devotees began to come." Sri Ramakrishna, 1836 to 1886. Sai Baba of Shirdi. "My master told me to give bounteously to all who asked. No one asks with wisdom. My treasury is open. No one brings carts to take away the real treasures. I say, dig and search, but no one wants to take any pains. Be the true sons of the Divine Mother, and fully stock yourself. What is to become of us? This body will return to earth, and the air we breathe will melt into air. This opportunity will not return." And Jesus of Nazareth. "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you that killed the prophets and stoned those who are sent to you. How often I have longed to gather your children, as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you refuse. So be it. Your house will be left to you desolate for, I promise, you shall not see me any more until you say, Blessings on him who comes in the name of the Lord." The decision to teach the spiritual way is as dangerous, if not more so, than the leap of faith whereby the adept enters the world. When Master Da began to teach, after culminating the events of his realization, he spontaneously began the sadhana or self-discipline of the enlightenment of others. The same empowered faith that motivated the adept at his birth became the process whereby he meditated others. That faith is Masuda's certainty that through devotees' sacrifice and responsible commitment to the way he demonstrates to them, the power of God, truth, or reality will break through into their ordinary lives. Masuda entered into the karmic or self-bound conditions of people, and for a period of time he even lived like the unprepared people who first approached him, so as to enter fully into service to them. Such sacrificial identification differed from the transformation and purification of his own life, in that the position of enlightenment was not abandoned. Instead, the enlightened disposition was sacrificed or magnified in relationship to others and for their sake. Masuda has worked in a way that is unprecedented in human time. He literally meditated others, liberally taking on their karmas, their qualities, their illnesses, their latent tendencies, their diseases, not only at the level of the grosser components of the physical body, the emotional being, and the mind, but also in the dimensions beyond the psychophysical. Many people confess to be drawn to Masuda and his teaching, yet it is quite another matter to realize the way that he teaches and take up his practice. The adept in his teaching work is demanding of devotees. He does not affect the niceties of social intercourse or even religious ceremonialism. Here, in the camp of the true spiritual practice, mutual submission guides and informs a way of life. One should therefore not be startled by the disciplines the adept requires of those who approach him. He has entered into a unique form of relationship with them, and they must endure a time of testing and purification as they learn to make right use of his grace. Crazy Da's Confessions of Love provide us with a glimpse of his extraordinary love meditation of others during the early years of his teaching work. They reveal the impassioned struggle of a God-man, waiting for devotees to show the signs of understanding the spiritual life he has been born to teach. Long before they arrived, Masuda has seen many people coming to him in visions. Even then, the city of duplication of the power of the spiritual meditation of others was active through him. All of the poems in this book, except for number 49, were written between 1971 and 1976. The manuscript was given to the Hermitage Renunciate Order by Masuda on August the 12th, 1982. The date of the writing of poem number 49 at the Hermitage Sanctuary of the Johannine Dias Communion, over 10 years after the first of the poems were written. These poems were written during a time characterized by only the most vague interest in Masuda's radical argument, even among so-called practitioners. People willingly listened to his talks and enjoyed the dramatic lesson-making, now known as the Garbage and the Goddess period. But it was not until the summer of 1976 that Masuda felt devotees capable of at least the beginner's response of assuming the preparatory disciplines of the way. Masuda's poems express the force of divine love at the core of his dramatic teaching work. His entire life has been a creative endeavor to instruct and transmit the truth to other people. His unusual method has evolved out of the uncommon nature of his mission and the cultural moment in which he is appearing. Masuda says, therefore, the truth that you seek has nothing whatsoever to do with the truth. Seeking is a program generated on the basis of the non-realization of truth, and therefore it is based on falsehood and unhappiness. Thus, I have always considered with you the way based on a direct and present understanding of what you are doing to happiness, what you are doing to the truth that is always presently the case. Each of the forms of the way that I consider with you is a culture of discipline, a process of existence, based on one or another kind of basic personality or orientation. Each of those ways is not a way of seeking the truth based on untruth or egoic seeking, enlarged through a long process of self-concerned remedies to overcome some impediment or problem, or to solve it through the attainment of some eventual and conventional state that is only believed to be the truth. Rather, All the ways that I communicate to you are first of all ways of understanding what you are doing to the truth, what you are doing in the present moment that generates a presumption of unhappiness and therefore the proposition of seeking for happiness. The way that Bodha teaches is comprised of three ways of practice of four or forms of approach to the ultimate practice of God realization. Each of the three ways is founded in present understanding, or the transcendental principle of enlightenment. The ways of practice that I consider with you are based on this understanding of what you are doing to happiness in the present moment, so that you will always presently realize happiness and make truth or God realization the basis of the spiritual process. The real spiritual process, therefore, is not only one mechanical thing forever, but it is based in the principle of always prior God realization or present happiness, and it is fundamentally a matter of magnifying that realization eternally. If your moments of existence are moments of the direct transcendence of the non-realization of truth, or the direct transcendence of unhappiness in every moment, then the spiritual process is the magnification of happiness. That magnification of happiness purifies, balances, awakens, transforms, and ultimately translates the individuated being into the transcendental domain. But it is not a matter of being unhappy for a long time, or going through a long period of cure and eventually realizing enlightenment or the truth. It is a matter of establishing yourself in every moment in its realization or the truth, in the circumstance of whatever limitations may apparently be the case. The limitations that are apparently the case are apparently the case, and will remain apparently the case for who knows how long. But happiness, truth, transcendental being, the divine condition realized in understanding, is your present condition, whatever is apparently the case. The spiritual process is a matter, therefore, of understanding that what you're doing to this real condition, directly transcending it in the moment rather than progressively curing yourself of it, and magnifying that realization or happiness, so that every moment of the spiritual process is really a matter of being purified by happiness itself. That process creates changes, equalizes or restores equanimity to the body-mind, eventually awakens a realization of transcendental existence, and then transfigures and transforms and ultimately translates that apparently individuated existence into the divine domain. When all this occurs is to be seen. If you are already happy and have already realized the truth, then there is no great or negative urgency to what may be eventually realized. What may be eventually realized is a natural event based on prior realization of what is essentially or really the truth. You must be established in the truth even while existing in this extraordinarily humble circumstance, because, let us face it, we are really apes. Maybe some of us apes get a little bit more serious about evolving and transcending, and our seriousness quickens the process that may otherwise take billions of lifetimes in billions of worlds. Maybe so. Where's my dead Aunt Minnie? She was a nice person. There was nothing bad about Aunt Minnie, and she is long dead. Is Aunt Minnie nothing, or is she Aunt Minnie Minnieing someplace else right now? Well, in my experience, it is completely clear that Aunt Minnie is Aunt Minnieing someplace else. She is perhaps a little bigger Aunt Minnie, a little bigger aunt, a little more Minnie, and someplace else, and also here too. That is also where you are going, and you need not know about it in advance. But not knowing about these things in advance is not really knowing what we are about at the present time, animates some individuals, stimulates them, quickens them, and makes them available to the spiritual process, which is a kind of condensation of the transformative processes that are latent in the cosmos and that make something different out of the ordinary progression of this apparently inane and frustrating universe. What you will do and how you will be motivated whether you will just linger and lag and disappear and trot on and make your transition, or whether you will be transfigured instead of just transiting, or leap in great bounds, or perhaps even be translated. It is all up to you. There is no game of status involved in it. It is purely a matter of what is important to you and how profoundly you are motivated by this life. For me, there is nothing profoundly motivating about life in itself or about the things you can do as human beings. Nothing about what people can usually do as human beings has ever interested me in the slightest. Personally, I have been very moved by other people and their problems and their disease and their suffering in this circumstance, but I have never myself been profoundly moved to be what you can basically get to be as a human being. It has just never been significant to me. I guess I just never caught onto it. That's all. All the things that you can be as a human being, basically, and I'm talking about the whole expanse, always seemed to me to be completely ridiculous, unsatisfying and unstimulating. I have been through the whole thing, from being a window salesman and a worker in a string bean cannery to everything you can be as a student and explorer of life, to being a mystic person and a person spontaneously manifesting psychic and spiritual powers, to being a spiritual teacher. And none of those roles in and of themselves is to me interesting or profoundly moving in any ultimate sense. I have fulfilled these roles from time to time according to my circumstance and my time of life, but without any intent that was manufactured by life as it seems. My motion has always overridden this human process, this ape-like, worldly material growth, and even subtle formulation of consciousness. I have something to do with it, obviously, but my motion has always overridden it. That motion accounts for my unusual life adventure and misunderstanding, and understanding and realization and experience. They are the expression of a unique impulse. Presumably, my devotees are also people who are gesturing in this infinite domain on the basis of at least something like that same impulse. They are not here, therefore, merely to be window salesmen and scholars and religious people and mystics and happy worldly people and survivors and old ones and famous ones and sexy ones and all the rest. They are those things to some degree and in one or another fashion, but to be such is not the prime mover of their existence. They are moved by something that overrides it, that is mysterious, that is more about release than it is about fulfillment, and that creates, therefore, a mere chaotic adventure. That chaotic adventure is valued by people who are moved in that fashion, and it is not valued by people who are not moved in that way and who are even critical of it. I guess that is just the way it is. Very few people in all of human history have travelled the dangerous path of the heroic adept. Each among the crazy traditions of spirituality, it is considered a dangerous feat. Very few have ever acquired the capacity to teach the way, and at time as the crazy wise. Teaching has given so openly as it is in Masuda's company, but as Masuda concedes, it is the necessary and perhaps the only means in such a darkened time as this to brighten the faint light that dimly glows in man. He says, August 23rd, 1982, my life is a little bit like going into the world of enemies and dragons to liberate somebody who has been captured. You cannot just sit down and tell a dragon the truth. You must confront a dragon. You must engage in heroic effort to release the captive from the dragon. This is how I worked in the theatre of my way of relating to people, particularly in the earlier years, and in the unusual involvements of my life in teaching. You could characterize it as the heroic way of teaching, the way of identifying with devotees and entering into consideration in that context, and bringing them out of the enemy territory, gradually waking them up. And finally, Crazy Da must sing. These poems of love and liberation are the hero's incantations, his ceremony of singing and meditating others. The small m me, or capital M me, of some of the poems refers to the adept in transcendental terms as a transparent servant of the radiant transcendental being. Those who are God-realized and who thus identify with the divine rather than their individual body minds, often in ecstatic speech, refer to me to indicate their identification with the divine, not because they exclude all but themselves, but because they see only the divine. In others of the poems, the me refers to Master Da in his natural person, as he waited for devotees to mature and recognize his spiritual nature. And in still others, the me refers to all of mankind and the conspicuous condition of the devotees that surrounded Master Da. Crazy Dharma Singh inclined to his weaker side. Confessional Poems of Liberation and Love by the Western adept Darfri John.